This is an NBC News special report.
Good afternoon. I'm David Gregory in Washington. We're going to take you live to New York, where President Obama is making a highly symbolic visit to Ground Zero, now in the process of laying a wreath at what is hallowed ground in this country and around the world in honor of the victims of that traumatic day. Nearly a decade now since 9/11, and just days after the president announced the killing of Osama bin Laden, who was behind the deadly 9/11 attacks. Let's listen in. The president, after observing a moment of silence and laying a wreath at Ground Zero, he's been meeting with family members of the victims and also first responders from that day, police officers and firefighters, some of whom from units in Lower Manhattan that suffered great losses responding to the events of 9/11. Again, all of this in a week filled with a sense of rejoicing and accomplishment and justice. Just days after Osama bin Laden was killed as a result of a raid on a compound outside Islamabad in Pakistan, carried out by Navy SEALs, a daring raid, a risky one, that President Obama ordered. Earlier today, President Obama visited a firehouse in Lower Manhattan, among them Engine 54, which lost 15 firefighters on 9/11.
Because of the courage of our military and the outstanding work of our intelligence, send a message around the world, but also send a message here back home that when we say we will never forget, we mean what we say.
The president, as I say, meeting with family members of those killed on 9/11, also those first responders, like those visits to the firehouses earlier today. During a week that, as I say, was filled with the bittersweet sense of justice and accomplishment, having ordered a raid that killed Osama bin Laden, but also the knowledge that nothing can be done to erase that sense of trauma and pain from the losses on 9/11. Many people have made the observation that this was the ultimate leadership moment for a commander-in-chief who in some ways had not been tested on this order, who had been the target of criticism from Republicans who have said that he has not shown the kind of leadership necessary to demonstrate he was capable of protecting America, despite the continuity of this administration with the previous administration's fight against terrorism, whether it's detainee policy or the surge of forces in Afghanistan. But nothing more potent than a moment like what this president experienced earlier in the week, ordering a raid that ultimately killed Osama bin Laden nearly a decade after the attacks. Ron Allen is in Lower Manhattan at Ground Zero. Ron, tell me about the president's visit and what the response has been there.
Well, it's a very somber occasion. This is a place that's always very heavy with emotion. And I think the highlight of it, of course, will be when he meets with the families one-on-one. We've been talking with a number of families since we've been down here after the killing of bin Laden, and there's such a complex layering of emotions that they feel. Relief, yes, that this has happened, a sense of justice, that this man so directly responsible for the deaths of their loved ones has been held accountable for this, but of course, none of that brings back the people who were lost. And so the pain that so many still endure continues. But I think there's a real feeling that of gratitude that the president is coming here to mark this occasion, coming here to focus the nation's attention on what happened here so long ago. With first responders as well, I think there's a feeling that the nation at times moves on and doesn't always remember and doesn't always pay perhaps the kind of level of attention that they would like to this particular place. So again, a feeling of gratitude that the president is coming and saying thank you to them, saying that we value your service, that we still feel your pain, and that we honor what you've done and what you continue to do every day for this country. This place now, is so much more alive than it's been in past visits that we've had here over the years. There's a lot of construction going on. The memorial that will be open to the public in a short period of time is now alive, and I think a lot of people are very glad to see all of that. Back to you.
Thank you, Ron Allen. And Ground Zero is hallowed ground, as I mentioned. It is the place where there will be a memorial, and there will also be new buildings. It is a construction site for the new Freedom Tower, nearly a decade on, which has still not been completed, part of the openness and the rawness of the wound. There was, I think, also within the White House a sense that the death of bin Laden afforded an opportunity for the president to visit, not so much about a victory lap, but a kind of closing of the circle. That here we are nearly a decade later, and the man responsible for the attacks that left that hole in the ground and the hole in so many hearts around the country has indeed been killed, that he has been brought to justice. It was President Bush who, in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, just 3 days later, made his first visit to Ground Zero to inspect the damage firsthand. And there was a moment that became an iconic moment of his presidency, when many felt he became a commander-in-chief, his so-called bullhorn moment, when he spoke to an assembled group of firefighters and others who had gathered, and the president said at that point, I can hear you, after he was speaking to the group, saying that America was on bended knee, and those who were assembled said, we can't hear you. And I said, well, I can hear you, and soon the people who knock these buildings down will hear from all of us soon. The man who was standing with President Bush is Bob Beckwith, a firefighter who was in the middle of what was such an impromptu moment at Ground Zero. Mr. Beckwith, nearly a decade later, what was your response to hearing the news about bin Laden?
I felt very, very happy that this had happened while I was still here, and I'm glad that the president's down here today to thank the firemen and the police, Port Authority guys, and the parents and siblings of the deceased that were in the building.
You know, as you compare these two presidential visits, one that you had such an important part in with President Bush, describe your emotions that day and that presidential visit, and compare it to now, nearly a decade later, with this sense of accomplishment about bin Laden, how you feel today.
I feel very good about the like I say, the president coming down here and coming to New York. It's a plus. It's a plus for the people, and I'm proud that he came down here and thanked the people.
Mr. Beckwith, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your perspective as we still look at live pictures from the president's visit to Ground Zero. As Ron Allen noted, he will meet later in the day with family members of the victims of 9/11. All part of a day to mark the loss, but to also mark a sense of justice, a kind of, if not a completion in this war, certainly a milestone. Nearly 10 years after the attacks, to be able to go to Lower Manhattan, to Ground Zero, to go to those family members and share with them that bittersweet moment of the end of bin Laden's life, some measure of justice for those who were killed and responded and felt such a sense of trauma that continues to this day, but also the resolve that an American war on terror has borne such an important result. More later on NBC Nightly News and on these NBC stations. For now, I'm David Gregory in Washington.